Everyone. Looks like we're live. Excited to have you all here. We'll give a moment for everybody to jump on.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday.
All right, I think we can kick it off quickly with just an introduction of who Insight Global is before we get started. Of course, we're talking data-backed strategies for people leaders, how we impart trust and care in our process to lead to highly productive teams. Insight Global as a whole, we are one of the largest services and consulting companies in the country and have a global presence as well. Anything from your typical recruiting services to full outsource models and technical delivery, in addition to cultural consulting and the whole gamut. Been around for a better part of 20 years and really looking forward to using our expertise to talk about this more with you. And of course, both Jill and I are here as a resource after the call. If you'd like to connect with us on LinkedIn or reach out, we're happy to discuss a little bit more about what we're talking about today. But to kick it off with some quick introductions, we have Jill and myself today leading this conversation. So you know who I am. My name is Rebecca Farno, of course. I live in Seattle. I am a sales manager within our digital office division. So it's a dispersed division that helps folks across the globe, regardless of where we're located geographically. I've been at the company in some regard for about 8 years. I started my career actually reporting into Jill in our Silicon Valley office, spent some years there together, and then went and worked for some startups for some time before returning back in our digital division about 3 years ago. And Jill, I'll pass it to you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Yes. Feel free to blow up the chat. It's always so funny with webinars because we can't see anyone's faces, but it is full circle having this opportunity to chit chat with Rebecca. And so wonderful. I'm Jill. I'm managing director for our advisory services practice. So think all things culture, leadership, people, transformation, adoption. It's the world that I live in, helping customers solve some of their biggest challenges when it comes to all of those topics and more. So definitely a passionate conversation and topic that I love to chit chat about. I know Rebecca does as well. So we're really excited to get into some of the dialogue. So before we do, we want to just get a little bit grounded into the intention of the conversation. And really what we want to talk about is how to build thriving teams and how to make your people productive and successful. It all starts from that first phone conversation in an interview to bring them into the company. And then how do you make sure that they not only stick around, but they're productive and they're happy and they're fulfilled? So we'll hit on topics like the importance and power of a successful onboarding experience and give you some tips and tricks of what you could do there to really improve that experience for that employee. And the new team members coming on board. But then I think a big meat of this conversation will actually be around the power of trust and the importance of trust and how to build trust pretty quickly with new team members. And if you're a leader on that call, how to really exemplify that and lead by example. And if you are an individual contributor on this call, how to be a team player and create that environment of safety to really get the most out of the people that you work with, but then also how to have that sense of purpose and drive the business forward. So, and like we mentioned, we talked about data-backed insights to really lead this conversation. So I'll pass it over to Rebecca and we'll get grounded in some data, as I think sometimes that can be really powerful, looking at some of the numbers before we jump in. So.
Totally. Yeah. And I think when we talk about intention with onboarding and training and just how you operate on the day-to-day as a leader or an individual contributor, but especially as a leader, sometimes that feels like it can take the backseat to the operational stuff, what needs to happen right now, what needs to happen to move the business forward. And you can kind of get lost in what the intention really means. But even on the prior slide, the note of 35% of employees report feeling engaged, that's a clear dictation of the need to build more intention, right? That is 65% of employees coming from our data that aren't feeling their level of engaged. And that leads to these kinds of situations, right? With 22% of workers having left a job in the first 90 days, 60% feeling disorganized training or a lack thereof. All of these things that can seem like the not so important parts of onboarding and bringing in the right person to your organization, but they speak volumes to a person's likelihood of sticking around, which is the most important thing, right? You identify the talent, you bring in the leader, and then you're expecting, years and not months, and that you have to have a return, they have to have a return on your investment when it comes to onboarding experiences. So we look at all this data and we talk about how we can really talk through like onboarding and the lenses of onboarding, which we'll get into. But one thing I really want to call out on this slide is that last point under the yellow dot. Workers with a strong workplace culture were 8 times more likely to report feeling engaged. Culture is everything. And I think that's such a nebulous term, and it's built on a couple things that we'll go over, including trust and just care, right? So when we look at trust and care, before we can get there and we can talk about this strategy, we can't impart a strategy without an operational framework in place. So we have to call that out, right? We look at onboarding from Insight Global and from a consultative standpoint through 3 lenses. Of course, you have the administrative, then you have the technical and the cultural. So administrative is the stuff that our TA teams, our HR teams handle, that you partner with them to make sure that they are exactly what needs to happen. Are they getting the right benefits package, the right communication around start date, the right communication around what initiatives they need to review prior to starting to feel up to date? What were the past quarterly business reviews, or something tangible that can make them feel prepared and engaged going in? And then beyond that, the technical training, of course. So what does ramp up look like? What do those kinds of things look like? Those, while not strategy, are very, very important tactical aspects to even allow the strategy time to grow and time to resonate with your people. So getting those down before hitting to the cultural aspect, I think it is really important.
Yeah.
At Insight Global, we have our whole consultant engagement program. I actually used to lead consultant engagement for my division a few years ago, and the whole strategy is structured touch points from the second a person accepts their offer through 6 months into the role, to make sure that all of these aspects are regularly communicated to our people, whether that be through group orientations, onboarding trainings to make sure that all of their systems are set up before they start, performance reviews, those kinds of things baked into somebody's onboarding program. It really gives opportunity for the cultural onboarding to happen. You get all these touch points. You get these, okay, here's the role, here's the expectation, here's the vision I want you to impart. That will always inevitably lead to getting to know the person and having cultural buy-in. So important to note the operational. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think that is so well said. And it is, you think, quite frankly, like when you bring in a new hire, okay, do they have their paperwork? Do they have their computer? Do they know how to do the job? But because we are so busy, I don't know if you feel this way too, Rebecca, when you speak with customers and individuals, but when it comes down to just how you show up as a person, how you behave, what are the norms, the expectations, how do we do things here, oftentimes gets overlooked, but it's probably the most critical. I don't know about you, but like when I was a new hire, like it's when you're laying in bed at night and you're like, did I say the right thing? Did I dress in the right way? Did I do the right? And so rather than just getting to work, your wheels are spinning around how you're showing up and fitting in, the behaviors, the norms, the belief systems. And so if you're a leader on this call and you're bringing on a new hire, don't overlook the importance and the criticality of slowing down around just how we show up and do work here. What are the norms, or what are, we like to call it, the weird and wonderful ways? How do we show up day to day? And having the time to like spell that out for your people, it really does go a long way, so that they can just get to work and start focusing on the work and not have to worry about all the nuances of how to fit in to this new culture and this new environment, because that's probably one of the most stressful pieces about being on a new team. You have the skills, you got hired for a reason, but how do I like do that here, So I don't know, something, even Rebecca, bouncing from here to another organization and then back, if that's something that you've experienced yourself. But
Totally. Yeah. And I think just your point of slowing down is so important, because we think about like things that we assume, you and I assume. I've been with the company affiliated with the company for 8 years. You've been 12 years?
almost 14, not to age.
14. Wow. Okay. 14 years, right? So we've experienced the culture and the evolution of the culture of Insight Global probably a little different from a new hire that would start, and slowing down to think, okay, what are my assumptions? And are those assumptions fair to assume this person to know? It's kind of the same thing with an onboarding process when you're bringing on, like, especially a leader, thinking like, okay, this person is going to own this strategy, they're going to own this vision, and they're going to own motivation of the line level managers beneath them. Slowing down to really understand, like, okay, when I am assuming action in this way, or if I assume a bias for action, what does that really mean? And how can I articulate that to my leader to make sure that my expectations are met and they understand what the expectations are? And I think slowing down is so important. Osama, I say you had a question. If you want to send it in the chat, we can answer as we progress through the conversation. Anybody, please to make questions. We're happy to answer them.
Way more fun when it's like this.
Yeah.
So, but yes, and I also agree. I love, Rebecca, you mentioned the process, and I know Insight Global does a phenomenal job from an engage process standpoint of engaging with those new hires all the way through. You mentioned up until 6 months. That's something else. I think when people hear the word onboarding, they think it's the first week of the job, but it's their experience in the first 6 months to a year. And if you don't have the time as a leader to really follow up and check in on that individual, whether that be every month, every couple of weeks, who else can you also lean on within the organization to make sure that human to human, that person is taken care of and they're checked in on outside of like, do you know how to do this certain task or this job? And having some dedicated time on the calendar, even if it's like a casual coffee chat catch up, like it makes such a difference to just feel like you matter and you belong, and finding those organic moments. But if you have to have it on the schedule too, to remind yourself, that's okay, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I remember those moments explicitly when you were my leader. I know I told you the story, but 2018, we went and got a car wash at lunch and sat on the bench and just hung out in the sun, spent some time talking. And I remember that very explicitly, just new employee, brand new to Insight Global, new out of college. Different circumstance than leading a leader, but it really resonated with me 8 years down the line. Just that 15 minutes of time that you had as a leader to spend with your people. Think about it from the other side too, is those unstructured moments can really, really drive culture and trust.
Yeah, and I think trust is, like we mentioned, it's a big part of, I believe, this discussion, because without trust, it's really quite impossible to do what you want to do in the most effective ways. And it's very simple. It comes down to being a human and caring about individuals and building trust, but there are ways to do it. And sometimes it might feel like a little bit of a chore of how do I find the time? And so I think there's this data that we found around just the importance of building a trusting team and ultimately what that does, and especially with any new hires that you're bringing into the organization. But if we go to, I don't know, Patrick, if you could flash that trusting teams slide. I think there's some good information on this one around some data, but we found that compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies actually have less sick days, 13% fewer sick days. 74% of people are less stressed, 40% less burnout, 50% higher productivity, and 29% more satisfied with life. So that's pretty powerful. And it really is creating that safety. And the more you feel safe to show up as yourself, to raise your hand when you're uncertain about something, the more you will hear from your people the truth and how we need to pivot and change. And, we're not getting this business result. We're not hitting our goals. We're not, achieving this project. Okay, well, there's people that are doing the work to achieve that project. So what is it that is bothering them, right? And if you don't have that trust or that relationship established, they'll probably never be honest with you about what's
Right.
actually going on, right?
Yeah. And I mean, in my team specifically, my whole philosophy is it's my job to provide a safe enough space for people to feel like they can fail fast and ask any questions. But it's their job to tell me when they're not feeling that way. And then it's my job to go fix it. Right. So I think like that mutual trust for my team specifically, and these are folks that I manage internally, just understanding like that trust is there, and then expecting behaviors are action, ambition, curiosity, self-awareness, and honesty, and just like people embody that when they feel like they trust that their leader is behind them on it and is going to be receptive to the friction moments. Because I don't think there's any team that can avoid friction, whether it's business related or not. And I think like that team mentality, even if you're all remote teams, even if you're very self-directed in your organization, like the people hate sports analogies, but sports articulates so well to high performing teams because it really, the trust comes from the bottom up. And that's something that we have to work to impart as leaders.
Definitely. And I'm just reading through some of the chat as well. Umesh, you mentioned what are the right questions to ask to get over the imposter syndrome. And if that's you as like a new hire or a leader, I think it's not being afraid to ask questions. You know what you know, but there's things that you probably don't know, especially if it's a new environment, and that's okay. I think oftentimes being able to be honest and vocal about what you don't understand can actually help overcome some of that. And if they aren't receptive to, helping, then that's another conversation. But I think just being brave enough to say, hey, I actually don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand it. But then on the flip side, being confident in what you do know and what you can bring to the table. But I also think as a leader, to instill a culture where people don't feel this imposter syndrome, you need that safety and you need that trust to do that. And I think it's important to find those little moments, so to speak. But if you're a leader on this call, something that we were talking about, Rebecca, the other day is just how trust is not linear. I think it's not black and white. We actually, with Compass, the division that I'm with, we teach something that we call the pillars of trust. And that's a way to really think about the depth of trust and the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. And so when you think about different pillars of trust, so to speak, we think of 4 different components. We think of relationships, trust built through relationships, through competence, through reliability, and through motive. So if you don't have trust with somebody, really try to reflect and dissect why there's a lack of trust. Is it maybe you have a great relationship? Maybe you have a really good relationship and they're reliable and their motive is really solid, but maybe they're not competent. You're like, you just don't really have the skill. I think you're a wonderful person. You get things done when I need you to get things done. But in terms of like the quality and the skill and the performance and the capability, it's not there. So I can't really trust you to do X, Y, and Z. So figuring out why, if you don't trust somebody on your team, or if you don't trust a leader, why is that? Where is that coming from? Is it relationship related? Is it reliability? Is it competence? Is it motive? And once you understand that, having a one-on-one conversation to be transparent and, hey, look, if there's someone on my team, hey, Rebecca, I'm really struggling a little bit, quite frankly, with trust because I don't really understand your motives. I feel like you're not in line with the direction we're going. And I know that, when I tell you to do something, you do it and you have the skill. That's why you're on the team. But I really want to better understand where you're coming from, because for me, I'm making assumptions about, I think you, and I don't think that's fair. And I want to have that trust. So calling it out, I think, is really powerful. From what I've seen, Rebecca, I don't know, for you, but.
Yeah. And I think imposter syndrome, whether you feel it from folks that report into you or you feel it from yourself, I think you called out such a good point of asking yourself those questions, because I think internally understanding exactly where your insecurity is with that person or with yourself, but you can't avoid the hard conversation that comes with addressing it and addressing these pillars of trust and maybe these areas of improvement with your team directly. And that builds trust in itself, as being direct and saying like, hey, maybe I'm, this is new for me, but I'm going to do my best to answer this with directness and say like, hey, I feel like we are struggling on this level of trust when it comes to your reliability to come through for me. And just not sugarcoating it, delivering it in a way that's respectful, of course, as always. But I think the directness, there's something to be said there about its ability to build trust.
Definitely. Well, and there's this Abe Lincoln quote that says, I don't like this man. I must get to know him better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about that quote a lot, because if I ever make assumptions about people, how do I slow down and think about why am I making that assumption? How do I get to know them a little bit better? Because most people are good and they mean good and they want to do good. Most people go to work so they can go home and feed their family and take the vacation they want to take, or take care of an elderly parent. And so if you're ever getting frustrated with somebody, really try to slow down and understand, where is that coming from. And there's this theory that, it's one of my favorites. It's called the fundamental attribution theory. I don't know if anyone's heard about this before, by Lee Ross, but it says that it's our tendency to attribute behavior of others based on character defects or flaws, while attributing our behavior to situational forces. So, what the heck does that mean? I always love this maniacs and morons analogy, where you're driving to work and you're running late for a meeting, and this person in front of you is going so slow, like 20 miles per hour under the speed limit. And you are like, you moron, speed up. I'm going to be late for my big meeting. And then at the same token, you're on your way home and someone's just racing around you, and you go, you maniac, you're going to kill somebody. And you're making assumptions about those people in those cars. What you come to find out later is that the person driving slow, that's the moron, actually has their child's science fair project in the back seat that they've been working on for a month, and they can't get in any kind of accident because it will break. And on the way home, the maniac driving 100 miles an hour has a sick kid in the back seat. And if you knew that, would you maybe not have road rage in that moment, right? This plays out at work all the time. The fundamental attribution error is real, and it happens a lot. And so when you catch yourself making assumptions about people, why are they doing the things the way that they're doing them? Because if it was you, you're like, oh, it's situational forces. But if it's somebody else, you're like, oh, it's a character flaw. It's probably not. There's probably something happening why they're showing up the way that they are. So as a leader, you want to try to overcome that by building trust and getting real and truthful with people. And I think even Shakti, your question around AI, which is like, I mean, that is like a buzzy topic right now. But you talk about using the human element, human interaction, to reduce like employee exits. And empathetic, you mentioned, Umesh. I think that's a great call out. But that is something that I would love, Rebecca, just hearing like your thoughts on this. But with AI, yes, it's a very real thing. It can be an incredible tool, and eliminating certain processes and the way that we do certain things. But ultimately, people are still showing up to get the work done. And so, how do you, as a leader, create those moments for human interaction? What are those one-on-ones look like? What are those quarterly reviews look like? Is it uh, you know, are you kind of just talking past people or beyond people, or are you present? And when you think about untimely exits, people leaving an organization, when you really boil it down, yes, it could be maybe financial, it could be certain situational things, but ultimately, it's oftentimes things that we could solve for if they were honest with you and truthful with you, right?
Mhm.
So, I don't.
Yeah, I agree. And just on the aspect of AI, I want to put my marketing hat on with this, because AI is such a polarizing stance for so many companies and just brands of, are we embracing the human side, or are we embracing the predictive side? What is, or not necessarily predictive, but the autonomous side? Like, what is our stance going to be? I don't think there needs to really be one. And I think when it comes to reducing employee exits, me personally, this is my opinion, but I see AI as a potentially predictive tool for recognizing certain behaviors in employees that might be at risk for quitting or leaving, or having dissatisfaction. Even, it doesn't even have to be employee loss, but using AI as those tools to then encourage the human interaction of, hey, like, I'm noticing some trends. I would love to address these with you and make sure that you feel supported. um, that's where the human and the AI really comes together. And that's my personal opinion, but I think that there are a lot of AI tools, onboarding for identity verification and automating certain screenings to make things easier for us. But I do agree with, I think what your opinion might be, Shakti, about like there is too much of AI, and I think you cannot lose. Absolutely, you cannot lose the having more human interaction than less to build those high performing teams, because you have to show that you care, right? And I don't personally think that a machine can show someone how you care, but they can help you facilitate the circumstances to get there. Kind of tangential, but hopefully that answers your question. Um,
Yeah. I also think when you feel like you're brought along for the journey and the ride, you're more likely to be bought in and to be a part of the experience. So if you're a leader on this call and you have people on your team, if there's ever a moment where you could bring people along with you, do it, because it goes a long way to feel like they're in the boat with you and they've co-authored what that looks like, whether it's the purpose for the team or it's a project that has to get executed. You should really very rarely ever do anything alone or isolated. And the more people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, the less likely they are to leave, because they feel like they matter and that they're valued and that they are cared for. And as much as there are micro cultures playing on top of each other at companies, you can really, and I don't want to use the word isolate because that's not necessarily needs to be the case, but you can have a little bit more control over your team and their experience and how engaged they are if you're willing to engage them. You know, I think we get so busy in our to-do list, and work has never been faster and transformation has never been more relevant. But if you're doing it isolated off in a corner, you're isolating the rest of the team and you're not bringing them along for the journey. They're going to start looking for something else. And I know, and I wanted to, Osama, you mentioned you're a mechanical graduate for mechanical engineering, and people are like, what's your experience? And you're like, I don't have any yet because I just graduated. The human element of going out into the world and networking and meeting people and them seeing you for who you are from a character standpoint goes a very long way. And being honest about that as well. And so I think it goes into looking for a role, starting into a new organization, leading a team. How do I bring people along for the journey that we're on, so that people feel a sense of purpose and pride in what they're doing? So
yeah, and in the spirit of the fundamental attribution era too, be having a degree in mechanical engineering and then starting as a technician does not mean that you are not a mechanical engineer. I think do not be afraid of a technician role, an entry level role, something that might not be a titled engineer. Don't be afraid of that role. A tactical perspective, when I spent years recruiting, that was so common. We see mechanical engineers, software engineers grow up through help desk for software, or grow up through engineering technicians, operators, those kinds of things, and evolve very quickly into their role in 6 months to a year, but willing to start with the right team and, vetting the cultural fit, vetting the scope, the mission, all of those things. If it's the right company to join, the role will come. That is my firm belief. As long as you're aligned to what you want to do long term, you'll get there.
Yeah. And cultures form through shared learning. And so I put something in the chat because as you were speaking, Rebecca, it reminded me too of when you're thinking about joining an organization that has a strong culture, that cares about their people, that shows up and they really value you for who you are, and you're leading in an organization that's trying to establish a great culture. How do you share stories and form beliefs and behaviors and get people bought into the culture, but also feeling like they're a part of it? And so it's really about starting with the why. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? Naming what it is that you are observing, like a behavior, for instance, teaching what that is, establishing rituals, and then creating desire. So as a leader, how do you make that come to life? So for example, in our organization, grit is really important, being gritty. This world is a tough world. There's a lot happening, and we're a services organization and we get told no a lot. So how do you have grit, and how do you add that into the culture. And it's all about understanding as the leader, well, why does grit matter? We're going to name it grit, maybe a ritual of an award every week. We're going to teach what it is. We're going to share stories of someone that exemplified it, and then create desire, because we're going to talk about that person in a group setting in a positive notion. And so catching people doing good things as a leader goes a really, really long way, to really create the culture that you are trying to drive and see, and get people that are onboarded. Going back to the beginning of this conversation, building thriving teams and onboarding new hires. How do you make them feel like they're part of something bigger and spend that time doing so? So that's just something that's a couple steps that if you're a leader on this call, I always recommend trying to activate or engage with catching people doing the right things. So
Yeah, and that's perfect segue. But it it's so important to recognize. I found myself as a new leader, like aggressively focusing on what the right things people are doing, like you just said, and encouraging those behaviors and heaving up on those rather than, oh, this could have been better. It's like, okay, well, this is exactly what went right. This, and this, and then this is how we're going to work on this one thing. And I think like framework for offering praise, kind of tactical, not as much of a strategy, but something that like changed the way that I think. I was in a leadership development course a couple months ago, and I was asked, is your praise as long and as documented as your feedback? And it was nowhere near that. And I had to internally reflect and think like, wow, does my team really know how proud of them I am, and for what? Because I think back to my praise and it's like, wow, you did really well on that meeting, or you absolutely, like, I've seen so much improvement on this over the last 2 weeks. Great job. But the feedback is like, hey, I've noticed this, and this. Here are 3 strategies for how we're going to improve it. We're going to check in 2 weeks, and we're going to do a bi-monthly sync to make sure that we're good moving forward. Completely lopsided, not equal at all. So naturally, the response from the people that you're leading, if that's the way that you lead your feedback and praise is something you just fling, whereas feedback is what is intentional. And I think being very intentional about both changes the way that your leader, or excuse me, that your people see you, and changes the trust that they have for you, and recognizing like, oh, it's not all feedback. They know what I'm doing right.
yeah. And I think another piece, so well said. It's a good thing to reflect on. Am I giving more feedback than I am praise? And praise is free. So we talk about unexpected exits of people. It's oftentimes, again, the lack of feeling value or worth or validation. Praise is completely free, and it does exactly that. It makes people feel like they matter and that they care. But also, I have like an allergic reaction. I don't know about you, Rebecca, to the word kudos. I can't
Mm-hmm.
word. Hey, I've got kudos for Rebecca because she did this thing. It like falls flat. But if you look at these steps in this framework, create some real meaning and doing it, you have to know your people. But if you can do it in a group setting where I'm able to like praise Rebecca in front of a group, but really go there and describe what happened and really how it made me feel as a leader, that I'm so proud. And then, hey, Rebecca, if you keep doing that thing over and over, the sky's the limit. You'll be able to get promoted. You'll grow professionally, personally. And it feels so good to be given praise, but it also feels really good when you're in the room and someone else gets praise. Because I don't know, it does something to you where you just can't help but smile, and you're like, ooh, I want to receive praise. It's
Yep.
contagious. So, and it's people are like, well, I can't, as a leader, I have no control over giving them a pay raise. Oh, okay. Yes, I get it. Money is a thing, but what can you control? And you can control your words, and you can control the way that you show up for people and the way that you praise people. So I am like the queen of praise. I'm obsessed with praise, maybe sometimes to a fault, but maybe I'm lopsided the other way sometimes.
That's a good thing, I
But I,
think.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, and I think discernment is important when not wanting to elevate praise of somebody that really needs some concrete work, but focusing on praising the things, the small improvements, the small wins. Um, I don't remember where this quote is, but great things or greatness is a lot of small things done well, and just not forgetting that regardless of the level of who you're managing. Because the difficult things that people do sometimes are the simplest things, and recognizing what is difficult for somebody and and rewarding them with words for doing the thing, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And I just saw that question from Osama. You mentioned how can organizations empower employees to safely report instances of favoritism without fear or retaliation? What mechanisms are in place? So I think I'd be curious to understand if that's coming from a place of you're the direct leader, or is this an HR group that's hearing this over here? Because I think it makes a difference too who it comes from. But if you think about just empowering employees to speak up. Again, it seems really simple. Your employee will not speak up if they don't feel safe to do so and they don't feel that level of trust from their own leader. But also, if you are maybe you are an HR function and you've noticed or observed other parts of the business where there is that like wall that's up, think about something like fireside chats or coffee chats, or if you know or you recognize that something is off, then I would be intentional and go out of your way to carve out time to just build a relationship and create a safe space in a different way. If you all are in person, being able to grab lunch with people, or like I mentioned, doing coffee. But if you are an individual leader speaking to how do I empower employees to speak up, it's also seeking feedback and being vulnerable as a leader. Oftentimes, leaders feel like they have to be the heroes and wear capes and that they have to have the answers to everything, and they do not. Actually, vulnerability is a really, really powerful superpower. And if you can show up for your people and be vulnerable that I don't know everything, they'll feel safer to tell you that they also don't know everything and maybe open up a little bit more. So that's another way to build some trust, is just leading through vulnerability. And again, it's a fine line. You got to know how vulnerable to get in what instances and moments, but creating moments for that. And if it's not natural for you, then make it, a Friday ritual. I know we on our team have a gratitude call every Friday, and we just talk about what we're grateful for about others on the team. And that can be personal or professional. And it just creates this really cool environment. But if you feel like you don't naturally create safe space, just plan for it, like have that moment once a week or once a month to create that dialogue intentionally. So,
yeah, yeah, and I think in addition, if that's something you feel like you're struggling with or a team is struggling with, identify a team within your organization that does not have that problem, that has a strong culture, a strong feedback loop, and open line of communication, and start meeting with that manager. Join their team calls once in a while. Start to learn how they operate and how they facilitate the environment that dictates the culture that they have and that you want, and make sure there's always open lines cross divisionally. I come from an integrated marketing background, so I'm always a proponent of breaking down the silos. But the more connections that you and your people have cross divisionally, um, the more those kinds of things aren't felt because people are able to get support in the way that they need it. And what I mean by that is having maybe a mentor, your people having a mentor from another department that they meet with once a month for professional development or anything like that. Those kinds of belonging cues or connection points with other divisions can really help feel that support. And then, as well, of course, provide that open line of communication if there are serious issues that do need to be raised where they don't feel safe to do that within their own team.
yeah, absolutely. And I would
Um,
say, I know we're getting to time here too, but just to kind of wrap up, you can't do it alone. So I think it's also knowing, like, are there those early adopters in my organization that I could bring them along with me to then, when they're with their peers, be advocates for what we're trying to do or what we're encouraging. But I think when we talk about just key takeaways, is teams thrive when they're engaged and they're productive. But how do you engage? Through trust, through connection. So connecting your teams with the company culture, with their purpose, with each other. Think about when you onboard a new hire, what are you talking to them about in the first week, in the first month? Is it all work? Is it personal? Is it around the culture, the nuances, the weird and wonderful ways, like we talked about, of how to show up? Are you shifting your focus from onboarding and training being two separate functions, or can we really think about the way that we bring people in and the way that we train them all in one conversation, and really trust being the engine to it all? And if this is a space where you do need extra support, I know myself and others within the Compass Division, this is what we do. We build cultural onboarding sessions, we develop leaders, we help transform cultures. But there's also a lot of things that you all can do on your own to really take your organization to the next level. So that's just what's on my mind. And I don't know about you, Rebecca, but that's just, as I think about all these things, very passionate about these topics, but it's
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. Yeah, I echoing everything, and I think just the key takeaway is caring leads to productivity, and trust leads to productivity, but it has to be built with intention. And I'm hopeful that today's conversation kind of helped us show how we show intention with our own teams and with our clients and partners, and how you can take some of that away to yourself as you think about this with your teams. This
Yeah.
was a great conversation. Thank you so much to everybody that submitted questions. I loved that. That was extremely interactive, really stimulating. This event recording will be sent out to all of you as a follow up as well. If you're seeking to learn more, you want to dig in a little bit more on these questions, or maybe what trust could mean for your team, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Jill through LinkedIn as well. My calendar link will be sent in a follow-up email. You're welcome to book time with me, and I'll get Jill involved if it's relevant. But thank you so much again for the time and sticking with us for the 40-minute webinar. Great content, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rebecca.